Hello everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw Lilo and Stitch have a pretty massive opening weekend globally, making it one of the best openings for 2025. Was not able to catch up to the insane opening that was, of course, the Minecraft movie, but still very strong nonetheless. And of course, all of the media is running with this narrative of it being the biggest ever Memorial Day weekend and all these other factors, while of course they ignore key facts and reality. And so we'll just go ahead and try to temper the Nancy Tartaglione and the good old Nance, good old Tony articles amongst the other shill box office media that love to, again, push narratives out there for clicks and for headlines without actually going into reality and presenting information as it is. And so we'll go into those and also what the real numbers are for Lilo and Stitch and Mission Impossible. But let's just say right now that Lilo and Stitch is well on its way to making massive profits at the box office, whereas Mission Impossible is looking to be a massive financial disaster. And it's not because of how bad the opening weekend numbers are for the film, because they are not good, especially when you compare them to the last film that came out in 2023. I mean, we're talking about the film being almost $50 million behind where that film was globally. But when you especially consider the $400 million price tag for The Final Reckoning, that is where the story really starts to come into play about how badly that film is doing in comparison to its budgets. Again, success at the box office is not about your final total number. It's about, hey, did you actually make your money back? Are you actually going to stay relevant into the future or not? And those are questions that we have to, of course, address and answer here. So let's just go ahead and dive right into it. So first, I need to call out Deadline. I always like calling out Deadline because they are usually the most egregious when it comes to all of these things. But first off, they want to put in the headline here, Lilo and Stitch serves to galactic $341 million global opening. It's actually not true, right? They are actually considering and putting in Monday numbers. Now, here's the big issue, okay? It's one thing if you're making a 3-day estimate and you're including Sunday's numbers because, hey, guess what? We don't have the full Sunday numbers yet, and so you're making some estimates there, you're making some projections, you're making some predictions, but hey, at least some of Sunday has gone by, and there's been enough numbers being reported as far as the opening time frames of the theaters to be able to have a good idea of where the film's final tracking will actually end up. That's why typically the 3-day totals are usually pretty accurate, with only minor changes happening on the Monday and Tuesday after. Whenever you have people like Deadline, and Box Office Mojo is notorious for this too, predicting what tomorrow's box office is going to be like, and then reporting them as actual numbers, I think personally that is ethically reprehensible. And also something that needs to be called out by every person that is talking about box office, everyone in the box office media space, because it is, again, getting to the point of ridiculousness that they will try to prop up these studios, prop up these movies with bigger numbers than already exist. And we're already talking about, again, big numbers for Lilo and Stitch. $300 million in and of itself is already big enough. But when you're trying to put in numbers that cannot possibly be accounted for yet and are trying to basically announce them as official numbers, good grief, guys, stop. Get some help. Please stop, and might want to hang up your journalist badges while you're at it, because this is just getting insane. I have to call this out because it drives me nuts every time I see it. It's already bad enough when you don't adjust for inflation, when, again, Memorial Day weekend, this is definitely a huge Memorial Day weekend. No one's going to, deny that. But saying it's the biggest ever, okay, we'll go ahead and adjust those numbers for inflation, and you actually get to numbers from 2007, 2017 that actually had bigger or as big numbers there, and those are just looking at the numbers, right? That's just looking at the actual box office data. That's not looking at ticket sales. And the reason why that's so important is because though the numbers might be as big or even bigger than previous Memorial Day weekends, are the number of people going to movies the same? And that is where the answer is a very clear no. Less people are going to theaters today than at ever, basically at any other point in history. Obviously, the COVID years notwithstanding, because those were years in which we had very little people, no people actually going to the theaters because the theaters were all closed. But we have not had this level of just how low the box office is at a global scale in a very, very long time. Again, we're talking here the last 20, 30 years. We have some of the worst numbers as far as actual people going to the theater that we've ever had, right? The culture was broken in many ways by COVID because studios took this wrong message of saying, oh, let's put everything towards streaming, and therefore actually put themselves into their own bind, tied their own handcuffs, making it so that now they are basically stuck providing that type of content directly on streaming as quickly as possible. And all the while they're doing this, they are losing people at the actual theater, which is hurting theaters, and it's also hurting their bottom line too, because they're losing where a lot of their profits ultimately and initially always came from. So again, calling Deadline out, Nancy and Tony at Deadline, because they're just again, pushing forth these false narratives. And again, especially when it comes to pushing forth the Monday numbers that cannot possibly be accounted for as actual data is ridiculous. I'm already sure there's going to be people in the comment section saying, well, your chart says $300 million. It's actually 340. No, it's actually not, because we have no actual reporting as of yet. This is pure speculation on Nancy's part, pure speculation on Box Office Mojo's part, and it drives me absolutely insane. All right, before I pop a gasket there, let's just go ahead and dive into the chart over on thenumbers.com. And so it is a big weekend, no doubt about it, for Lilo and Stitch. $145.5 million just in the domestic opening. Very, very good. This shows that there's a very strong family audience coming out to see this movie. It's also that good reminder that Disney always has a vice grip on theaters, all right? If you don't know this already, having worked at a theater myself, I can say this for sure, that Disney was always the most notorious of the studios as far as getting a number of screens, a number of theaters available to it. And this is something that, of course, you would want to see from a company as far as, if you're a stockholder in that company, if you're someone that supports that company, because, hey, you want to have that movie out in as many screens as possible, get as many eyeballs in front of it as you can. But when you are basically hurting theaters by doing so, by saying, oh, you want our movie? Oh, you want to show our Lilo and Stitch? Well, guess what? You have to have X amount of 3D showings, X amount of IMAX showings. If you can't follow our demands exactly, you don't get a movie at all. It gets very crazy, to say the least. And also, it crowds out other films. And again, one could argue that this is the state of competition, but when you are a massive company like Disney and you are strong-arming theaters and other theaters or rather other studios don't have even the same capacity to do such a thing, starts to make the question of, maybe do they have a monopoly on this practice or not? And I think there's a good reason as to why there are these massive companies that are being investigated for monopolistic practices, to say the very least. But that's a whole other topic for a whole another day. The point is, Lilo and Stitch doing very, very well, no doubt about it whatsoever. But how is it actually doing in comparison to maybe some of the other films that have come out in this same field, going into the live action adaptations? This is definitely the best that they've had in quite a long time. This is significantly better than Disney Snow White, which had an abysmal $42 million domestic opening weekend. It's even better, and these are all adjusted for inflation, by the way, too. It's even better than 2019's Aladdin, which only opened to $112 million, better than The Little Mermaid live action, which only opened up to $98 million back in 2023, but it is still not quite up to the level of where they were before the pandemic, right? In 2017, for instance, with Beauty and the Beast, which had a $220 million domestic opening, and The Lion King from 2019, $236 million. Now, I will say that I'll have to put an asterisk next to Lion King because it's called a live action adaptation, but we all know it's just complete CGI, and so to me, it's still going to have the same benefit that any other animated movie would have, and that's why I'm not comparing this to other animated films releases, all right? Because this is talking about films of a similar vibe, of a similar audience, right? Of a similar mindset. And for whatever reason, right, the live action adaptations just typically don't do as well as some of the animated fare in many circumstances and in many cases. Even with all that being said, with the numbers being as they are for Aladdin, Little Mermaid, etc., we're talking about movies that went on to do quite well, right? Aladdin made $1.2 billion by the end of its run. The Lion King, $2 billion. Beauty and the Beast, $1.5 billion. And so that's why I do think there's a pretty good chance, based off of these opening weekend numbers, Lilo and Stitch has a good chance of getting to $1 billion at the box office. Do I think it's going to do a lot better than The Little Mermaid's $588 million? Absolutely, I do think that's going to happen, and it's easily going to surpass that of Disney's Snow White, because that's not really saying much of anything at all. But I will reserve official projections on exactly how much money the movie will make until we actually get those week 2 numbers, that week 2 drop off, because even though it's very clear that the families and audiences are going to see this movie, the normie audience especially going to see this movie, really still a lot is really unknown as far as what people think about it. Because if you look at people that are hardcore fans of the original animated movie, it's very split. Right? Even amongst that specific demographic of people, there's some people that are loving it because of how faithful it is, and often, it often is very faithful throughout the movie. But there's also some pretty big changes, especially with the main character sister of Nani, right? Her whole character and her whole ending, especially, is changed, and it's pretty significant and pretty much flies in the face of what her character is supposed to be. It's one thing if you make changes that are still in line with the spirit of the story, still in line with the spirit of everything like that. But when you have a whole movie rooted on family, and what that character does at the very end, again, trying to avoid as many spoilers as I can, but what she does, it really makes you ask that question of, this really isn't the same person at all. And that's why you do have this divide amongst people that are fans of the original. Now, when it comes to newer fans or people that maybe don't have as much attachment to the original film at all, I think you're definitely seeing a lot more of a positive praise given to it. And again, the numbers seem to be bearing that out pretty pretty well also. And so I do suspect the film will probably hold pretty well into next weekend, especially as we're now entering into the summer months with more and more kids being off of school. So do expect those numbers to be a little bit higher going into next week, those daily numbers. And it'll be interesting to see exactly how much more money the film makes down the line. Now, we can't say the same thing as far as success for the likes of Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, because $63 million, that is well below what the Dead Reckoning opening weekend was. Now, remember, right, the Dead Reckoning weekend did have an advantage of opening on like that Monday, Tuesday. Personally, I think that actually hurt the film in the long run, right, as part of what hurt the film in the long run. This movie, I think, is suffering from a lot more than that, right? The 3-hour runtime is not helping this movie. The fact that you, again, seems like you have to do homework to watch the film and really to be able to enjoy it, at least that's the perception that many people have, is hurting it too. And though some people might say, oh, but it made almost $200 million globally, what are you talking about, Odin? Like, what are you even going off on? Yeah. Those are the same people that ignore the fact the film cost $400 million, just your production budget. That's not marketing. So you're talking about at least $600 million being spent on this movie. And then you're also forgetting that the film does not get 100% of the box office receipts back. So of that $190 million, well, guess what? The studio gets very little of that back in comparison. All right, 55% take from the domestic audience. And that is, again, where you're really starting to see some danger going on because this film is not doing well domestically at all versus the international where it gets about 40% back, unless you're in China, of which case you only get 25% back as a movie studio. So as of right now, what we can say is the chances of Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning making any money at the box office is essentially zero. We can't say it's mathematically impossible, but to say it's improbable and laughably so is a clear statement to make as well. Again, this is coming from someone who overall I enjoyed it. I had some issues with the story overall. I thought the story was pretty weak, but it was still a fun time, especially the last hour, which has some of the best action sequences that we've ever seen in a movie. But even with all that being the case, this movie is not making money. And for anyone out there who's still going to try to argue, oh, it's a success and it's doing really, really well, I'm sorry. You're ignoring two key factors: the budget and how much your movie actually makes back on those box office receipts. And until you actually educate yourselves on those issues, I don't want to hear it. Going to the number 3 spot is Final Destination: Bloodlines, dropping the number 3 spot here, dropping 62%. So that's a pretty massive drop in general. But because of how well this film has done in its opening weekend, how this is still a pretty strong, second weekend number for a Final Destination movie, and also how well it's doing internationally, this film has already made its money back and is adding overall to its profits. So kudos to Final Destination and Warner Brothers for having yet another massive winner on their hands. They're definitely going in the right direction this year, which is not really what the case was in previous years for that company. Thunderbolts from Disney holding 45%, but still, that's not very good because of how much money this film needs to make back still, even at a $180 million budget. And Sinners rounding out the top 5 here at another $8.7 million. The biggest percentage drop-off I've seen in a while for this film, 42% drop, but still making quite a bit nonetheless. $256 million domestically is where that film currently is at this point. Again, very impressive to say the least. Lilo and Stitch worldwide, going into these global numbers, as you can see, $304.2 million. That's why I like the numbers.com, because they typically don't include fake Monday numbers that have not yet been accounted for. Talking to you, Box Office Mojo, and you, shill Box Office Media, it's only made $304 million at this point. And even this is technically still an estimate, but at least there is some legitimacy to it because we have had some Sunday numbers reported enough to make some projections on how the day likely will continue to go. We can't say the same thing for Monday, and that's why any site reporting those Monday numbers should not be trusted in any way, shape, or form. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, $190 million globally. Again, look at that. Almost twice the amount of money made internationally. 40% is what you get from the international. And I know this film, I believe, is getting an international release in China. Yeah, it's getting released in China 5/30, so it's not released there yet. But any money it's made there, 25% is what you actually get back on that movie. So this is not a very good sign. It's only made 0.5 times its budget. That is not a good opening weekend. By comparison, Lilo and Stitch will only cost $100 million to make itself, has already made 3 times its budget. This is, I think, the best metric to show you why this is a success and why Mission Impossible is not. Financially speaking, of course, 3 times your budget in your opening weekend versus 0.5. Now, why is it Lilo and Stitch has actually not broken even yet? That's because it also has the same international domestic problem. It's doing pretty well domestically, but doing that much better internationally. And so therefore, even though technically it's made 3 times its budget, not every film is having a break-even point of 3 times its budget. Some films might be a little bit less. Some films might be a little bit more, because it really comes down to where you make your money at the end of the day. Final Destination, $182 million globally. Very good numbers there. Thunderbolts at $353 million. Again, slowing down enough to where, not going to break even, or not going to get to that point. And even the prospects of it getting to the likes of the total box office for Captain America: Brave New World, not looking that great either. Again, I thought, hey, maybe this would be the weekend we started to see things shift for this movie a little bit, but that's just not happening. And so I would say the chances of the initial projections that I had in the movie getting upwards of $400 million, I think that might not be on the table anymore with how it's currently tracking. Might have to give up on that prospect. Sinners doing very well, still tracking to, again, might be able to get to $400 million. We'll have to wait and see on that one. This is purely a domestic. This is why this is a huge victory. The big problem, of course, though, is that it cost $90 to $100 million to make. Had it not cost that much money, oh man, the budget, the profits on this movie would be even better than what they already are. In the comparison here between The Final Reckoning, Day of Reckoning Part 1, as you can see, $63 million for Final Reckoning, it's the current movie, versus $81 million. And again, some might argue, oh, well, Dead Reckoning Part 1 had a massive advantage by opening up on those earlier days. Well, those earlier days really did not help the film all that much, if we're going to be honest there. So that's one thing. And secondly, it doesn't really matter because of how much more money this film cost, right? It's about $100 million difference between those two movies, and that's adjusting for inflation there, because this film cost $290 million, and still the movie lost $100 million, lost north of $100 million for Dead Reckoning Part 1. Final Reckoning costing $400 million. Yeah, this movie's going to lose probably close to $200 million when everything's said and done. And that's assuming it has a good release by the end of its run. Let's go over to the charts, because we love charts here on OMB Reviews, and we can start to make some projections on a couple of things. So first, Final Destination Bloodlines at $182 million globally. After 2 weeks, we can project the film will make somewhere between $260 million and $360 million by the end of its run. That's just insane that a Final Destination movie has the prospects of $300 million possibly happening. Now, again, if we see drop-offs like we've seen this past weekend, it might get closer instead to that $260 million number, but it shows you why budgets do matter, right? $50 million budget for Final Destination is the reason why this film has already made its money back, and right now projecting the film will make between $81 and $143 million in net gain profits. As of right now, it's around $11 million in the black. So yeah, I think $50 to $100 million minimum is very likely for this movie. And hey, kudos to them for making a film to make its money back, and also to make some pretty good profit. Probably enough to pay for not only itself, but also for future projects down the line. That's exactly what you want to see with your movies. Now, some of these films have not been officially updated in the charts here because Box Office Mojo sucks for various reasons, but it is much better at importing data than thenumbers.com. So it's one of those positive and negative. The data at the numbers is more accurate. However, it often takes forever to actually get things to come over to the chart. If anyone can think of a better way of handling that, please let me know and contact me, OMB Reviews at proton. Proton.me. Anyone who knows Proton emails, you should know what that is. Anyway, OMB Reviews is the first part of that one. Anyway, Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning, $190 million in its global opening. As you can see, $500 million currently in the red. Now, it's going to cut into that quite a bit, all right? This is going to have on paper, what seems to be a decent run. It's not going to be anywhere close to the run that Lilo and Stitch is going to have. This film's already $56 million in the red, meaning this film by the turn of this week, right? By the time those Monday numbers do finally come in, we might be already talking about this film breaking even, depending on how good those Monday numbers are. And if not by Monday, then at least by Tuesday, Wednesday. We're talking about this film breaking even within the next few days. And by next weekend, it's going to be adding on to have like $10 to $20 million probably in net profits, if not more. So Lilo and Stitch is a huge victory. And again, $100 million film. The reason why, for people who kind of wondering on this, I saw some people comment about it. The reason why, and I looked further into it, was the film initially was made for Disney Plus. So they spent $100 million on the production budget for that movie. In 2024, they decided to instead have it be a theatrical release. But the thing that we don't know is, did they spend any extra money to adapt the film for theatrical release, right? Do they need to do anything with the effects, right? Seeing the effects on a small screen is not going to be the same thing as seeing it on a big screen. So those are legitimate questions, right? Of, hey, were there any post-production cost to transferring and making the film ready for theaters? Was there anything added to that? At the very least, we do know this film cost a heck of a lot of money in marketing, as Disney is already notorious enough for their budgets. They're also notorious for overspending on their marketing. And so we're talking about at least another $100 million in the marketing costs for the film. And that is the reason why this film currently is not at that break-even point, right? Because I have that accounted for there, $100 million budget, and because we know this is a Disney film, $200 million in your marketing, right? Most of the other films are at 1.5 times the budget, so that's why if you use that metric, it would be breaking even right now. It would be profitable at this point, but because we know Disney definitely did spend a little bit more on that budget most likely, and at the very least on that marketing cost, That's why it currently is where it is. But again, this film is easily going to pass that mark, and it won't be very long until that actually happens. And so anyway, those are the numbers currently as they stand, and we'll do some further updates as we go over the course of the week. Of course, we've got our Monday show tomorrow, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. For those who don't know, every Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, I go into full box office mode for the weekend, talk about any relevant news stories, movies that I've seen, things like that. I've seen Mission Impossible and Lilo and Stitch, and in fact, Final Destination as well. In fact, I've seen all of these last 4 movies, Fight or Flight as well. So if you have thoughts on those films, let me know in the comment section below. Also, big questions, of course. Mission Impossible. Is there any chance for it to break even? Again, using logic and reason, no, there is no chance for that to actually happen based off of what we're seeing, right? We're talking theatrically at this point in time. Even if you just talk about VOD, Blu-ray, 4K sales down the line, you're still talking about it needing to make another $200 million off of any of those deals and any of those sales. I don't see that happening, especially when they had to do that $100 million worth for the last movie. I don't see them making another film. Narratively, they could easily make more Mission Impossible films, right? The film does not really leave at a point where you're like, oh, they can't make anything else after that. It's a clear ending. That's one of the issues I had with the film, was that it wasn't really that clear of an ending. That being said, it is, not looking good financially. And so why would they want to spend any more money on this franchise when the last 2 films put them in the hole about $300+ million? And again, at this point, this last one has not yet even gotten close to making up even that $300 million that I'm giving it at this point. So what are your thoughts on that one? What do you think the final box office is going to be? I could see it doing very similar to the last film, right? Where it maybe gets the $500-ish million, maybe less, maybe a little bit more. But overall, I think that runtime hurt it. I think the marketing in many ways hurt it, right? It was very impressive stuff to see, but it's hard to sell people, it seems, on a film in a long-running franchise. And again, a 3-hour runtime is probably the biggest reason as to why people are not going to see it. Also, thoughts on Final Destination. What do you think the final box office on that is going to be? And Lilo and Stitch, $1 billion. I think right now, good chance. Most films tend to make around 3 times their box office global opening. That would put this film right around $900 million. That's the average run for most movies. So we could see this film go anywhere between $850 million globally to $1.2 billion globally. What are your thoughts on where that's going to end up as well? Please make sure you back it up with logic and reason as well, and not just emotion, because that's oftentimes what I see whenever I make people upset, when I hurt people's feelings with my thoughts on these movies and with the actual box office raw data that just cannot be argued at this point. So anyway, your thoughts on these things, let me know in the comment section below. If you like this video, smash that like button. Make sure you also smash the rumble button as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed Memorial Day weekend, a blessed Sunday, and as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illick and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribe Star people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. Also a huge shout out to my newest YouTube member, Raichu. And lastly, to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy, shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.